They said it was mercy. When the message came in, the translation modules filtered the alien language into a clinical monotone that echoed through Earth's orbital command stations and deep-sea bunkers. This is not an act of war. This is a cure. The weapon bloomed in silence. There was no fireball, no shriek of metal or thunder of impact. Just a light and eerie aurora that shimmered across the sky like oil slicks spilled on the night. Blue-violet and green waves flickering across the atmosphere. Every satellite watching the upper stratosphere reported the same temperature flux, particle distortion, and an invisible web of nanostructures threading through the ozone like veins in a lung. We didn't know what it was, not at first. Some called it radiation. Some called it a virus. Others, a few, whispered the unthinkable. This is it. This is extinction. We just haven't died yet. But the death didn't come, not the way we feared. The first signs appeared within hours. In the refugee camps, in the burned-out zones of Southeast Asia, survivors of the earlier orbital bombings began to heal. Not just improve. Skin that had been blistered by plasma burns regrew smoother than before. Old war wounds closed. Soldiers who had lost their sight in antimatter flashes blinked, gasped, and cried out as light returned to their eyes. Everywhere. The aurora passed overhead. Sickness vanished. Hospitals reported miracles. Heart disease, cancer, genetic disorders. Gone. The weapon, if it even was a weapon, wasn't killing us. It was perfecting us. But perfection comes at a price. I saw it. Myself in the lab. I was there when the first post-exposure scans came in. My name is Dr. Elena Mora, and I was one of the lead xenobiologists studying alien contact protocols under UMEG, United Nations Advanced Genomics. For years, we'd theorized about what alien biotech would look like. We expected domination, destruction. What we got was worse, dependency. Because as the changes took hold, we began to see the real truth. It wasn't just that people were getting better. It was that they were no longer human. DNA had shifted. Proteins realigned in ways that had never been seen in any Earthborn species. Neural pathways doubled, then tripled. Entire portions of the brain previously dormant lit up with activity. People stopped sleeping, stopped aging. Some stopped eating altogether. One patient spoke 60 languages overnight. Another survived in a vacuum chamber for 3 hours with no protective suit. At first, they were heroes. The evolved, the media called them Humanity 2.0. But I saw it in their eyes. They weren't the same, and they knew it. The aliens returned after 7 days. No ships. Just another broadcast. Your healing has begun. What was broken is now whole. What was mortal is now corrected. And then the final line, spoken not with menace, but reverence. You are welcome. Welcome to what? We never found out. Not fully. Not then. But I remember the first riots. They started in New Santiago. A crowd of thousands gathered outside the local government's medical triage station, demanding to be exposed to the aurora. Some had already been, but wanted more. They believed the transformation was incomplete, that there was another step, a higher form they could ascend to. That night, 52 people were trampled. The next day, it was 500. Governments collapsed under the pressure. Military units refused orders. Some joined the evolved. Others deserted. And then came the whisper. The resistance, led by General Aaron Vex, an old war dog from the Mars insurgencies. He hadn't been exposed. He didn't trust the miracle. His face, half scarred from the blast at Tarsus Ridge, remained unhealed, and he wore those scars like a badge of warning. They didn't save us, he said during his first pirate broadcast. They rewrote us. I met him on day 12. He stormed into my lab at Unaji's subterranean Arctic compound, surrounded by his black-armored ghostwalkers. They weren't gentle. You're the one who mapped the genetic delta, he growled, throwing a tablet across my console. You knew what was happening before any of us. I didn't deny it. Yes, I said. I knew. He stared at me for a long time. Then he asked me the one question no one else dared to. Can we reverse it? The answer was no. Once the change started, it couldn't be undone. The body, if you could still call it, that reconfigured itself into something else entirely. Bones strengthened with lattice carbon. Immune systems self-repaired at quantum speed. Mind split into multitasked processors capable of recalling the entire Encyclopedia Galactica. But the soul, that was the real mystery. Some of the evolved began to disappear. Not die. Disappear. Walk into the sea, into space, into the desert. No one knew where they were going or why, but a pattern emerged. Before they vanished, they always said the same thing. I can hear them calling. Calling to what? We still don't know. But I think I understand now. The weapon was not a cure for disease. It was a cure for humanity. We were the disease. We, with our wars and borders and entropy, our flawed genetics, our fragile minds. They didn't hate us. They pitied us. And like a farmer mercy killing a sick dog, they did what they thought was right. But they didn't expect Aaron Vex. They didn't expect us to fight back even after being healed. They didn't expect me, because I was one of the first exposed and I stayed behind. My body has changed. My mind runs faster than light. I can see through walls. I can hear frequencies beyond reality. But I remember, and I choose. I choose us. Whatever we've become, we are still ourselves if we choose to be. And in that truth lies the one thing they could never anticipate. We turned their salvation into resistance. They gave us immortality. We gave them hell. They thought we were still reeling, that our silence was surrender, but they misunderstood humanity's quiet. It wasn't weakness. It was the calm before a storm that no sensor array could predict. I was stationed at Aegis Station, a high-orbit facility drifting like a quiet guardian above Earth's hemisphere. From there, I saw the weapon arrive, the one that was supposed to be their coup de grace. The Nalkari Ascendant weapon, something they'd only ever spoken of in whispers. It was a living bomb, not mechanical, but biological, coated with our genome, tailored to our evolution, designed to unravel the strands of humanity at a molecular level. The kind of weapon that didn't just destroy bodies, but unmade identities, thought, memory. They fired it, confident that the moment it touched our atmosphere, the very idea of human would be erased. And they were right about one thing. Something changed, but not in the way they expected. When the bomb bloomed across the upper atmosphere, people across Earth collapsed, but not in death, in transformation. I watched it happen from orbit. Clouds twisted with bioluminescence. The aurora pulsed like a heartbeat, and beneath it, Earth stood still, as if holding its breath. Then came the screaming dot, except it wasn't pain, it was singing. I don't have another word for it. The people on Earth weren't dying, they were harmonizing. Their voices rose as one, a resonance, not of the throat, but of every atom. It started with the infected. Those meant to be dissolved by the alien pathogens stood up with golden eyes, their wounds sealing before our medics could reach them. They spoke in a tongue none of us recognized, but it felt familiar, like an ancestral echo from before we'd even climbed out of the trees. The virus hadn't killed them. It had unlocked them. It was as if we'd been wearing a limiter for Yanzand now. Someone had cut the wires back on Aegis. Dr. Soria Chen, our xenogeneticist, stared at the atmospheric readings and muttered, "This isn't evolution, it's correction." We didn't understand at first, but as the hours passed, it became clear. The weapon was never meant for any other species. It had been created after extensive study of us, after dissecting captured humans, probing our minds, analyzing our biochemistry. The Nalkari thought they'd isolated the weaknesses in our genome, but in doing so, they'd mapped our most powerful sequences. They saw our adaptability as a flaw, our resilience, as a bug in the code. But it wasn't. It was a trigger, and they pulled it. The survivors, on Earth if we could still call them, that began doing things that defied all known science. One woman walked into a reactor meltdown to rescue her child. She didn't burn. She absorbed the energy, then healed the leaking core with a touch. A paraplegic veteran stood from his wheelchair and sprinted across a battlefield, faster than any exosuit. A young boy reached into a soldier's chest, pulled out a shredded lung and grew him a new one, with nothing but his hands and a whisper. They weren't human anymore. Or maybe they were more human than we'd ever been allowed to be. That was the revelation. The weapon hadn't rewritten us. It had removed a lock. The Nalkar realized it too late. Their fleets, still watching from the edges of the solar system, picked up the same anomalous signals we did. Human neural networks lighting up like quasars, DNA replicating with precision never before observed in nature, biomechanical fusion happening organically. The thing they'd fired at USM's cocktail of synthetic retrovirus and engineered entropy had interacted with something they never accounted for. Not just our biology, but our will. They never understood that humanity's greatest asset was never just our flesh or our brains. It was the fierce refusal to break. And now, even their deadliest weapon couldn't kill us. It made us stronger. I received a transmission from Earth just 26 hours after detonation. It came from what remained of Geneva Command. Only, it wasn't Geneva Command anymore. It was something new. Commander Voss. The message began, "This is Director Alma Reyes of the Collective Conscious. We are not as we were. The species designation human is no longer adequate. We are awakened. We are one mind, many bodies, and we remember everything." They remembered the bomb, the pain, the fear, the betrayal. They also remembered the ones who did this, the Nalkari. The message continued, "We will not seek revenge. We will not attack, but we will respond." The weapon they sent did not break us. It taught us, showed us who we are, who we've always been. There was silence after that then, as if the earth itself were speaking. The clouds over every continent twisted upward into a spiral and atmospheric message directed to the stars. "We see you. We forgive you. But we will not forget." The Nalkari sent a diplomatic envoy immediately. Too late. Earth was no longer answering calls, and something far stranger had begun. The awakened started building, not with steel or nanotech, but with light, with vibration. Cities rose overnight from crystal lattice that defied gravitational stress models. They weren't just structures. They were instruments, amplifiers, receivers. Earth wasn't preparing for war. It was preparing to transmit. That's when we realized this wasn't just about the Nalkari anymore. Whatever we had become, it had one purpose: to signal the rest of the galaxy. To let the universe know, you tried to break us, but we are the storm, and we are coming. They expected a wasteland, a graveyard, silence. Instead, they got a symphony. After the rebirth waves swept across the continents, the world was different, not broken, not ruined, but alive in a way that defied every natural law known to man. Alien. Trees sprouted where there were none. Air was cleaner than recorded in human history. Entire ecosystems stabilized overnight, and oceans glowed faintly under moonlight, teeming with life that hadn't existed in millennia. But it wasn't just the Earth that had changed, it was us. My name is LT Maravelin, and I was one of the first exposed to the enemy's weapon. I was stationed at Dome 17 in Antarctica when the Varkari unleashed their Omega Singularity Pulse. We were told nothing would survive, it not even light itself. But I'm here, and I'm no longer exactly human. The changes began small. My wounds healed too fast. My eyes saw colors I had no name for. I could hear the thoughts of others, not words, but intentions, moods, subtle mental movements like static behind a song. And I wasn't alone. Every survivor touched by the weapon had something extra. Some could manipulate magnetic fields with thought. Others communicated with animals like old Earth myths. A child in Nairobi stopped a tidal wave with a scream. Across the globe, humans became more than we had ever been. Not mutants. Not freaks. We were activated, and the aliens panicked. Their ships re-entered orbit 3 weeks after the pulse, likely sent to assess the damage. What they saw must have terrified them. Cities, glowing with bioluminescent energy. Forests that moved as if sentient, and humans staring up at the sky with no fear. No need for weapons, just waiting. We watched their observation drones fall from the sky, disabled by nothing we could track. Birds swarmed them. Trees grew vines mid-air to snatch them. The planet rejected their presence with a will of its own. Then came the first confrontation. A Varkari stealth team landed near the Himalayas. Elite soldiers, strong, fast, cloaked in shadow armor and silent step tech. They went missing within an hour. All we found were their suits, empty, wrapped in moss, lying in the center of a temple that hadn't existed the day before. The Earth was evolving, and it loved its new children. In Dome 17, I was taken to the inner lab, where Dr. Ethan Morove, our leading biogeneticist, ran constant scans on me and the others. His conclusion: "We've become quantum harmonizers," he told me, eyes wide with something between awe and terror. The weapon didn't destroy our code. It rewrote it. It fixed us. It made us optimal. He paused. It made us a threat. That word lingered. Threat to whom? The Varkari didn't wait to find out. They sent a fleet. Dozens of carriers and weapons platforms poised above Earth like a judgment. Every nation on Earth held its breath. We didn't fire a shot. We didn't need to. The sky answered for us. Clouds twisted into perfect spirals. Lightning arced upward instead of down. Entire weather systems bent into defense formations. The moon pulsed in a strange rhythm, and people across the world began to hum a single note that resonated deep in our bones. The Varkari opened fire, and the moment they did, something ancient responded. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was Earth. A massive shockwave erupted not from technology, but from the ground itself. Pillars of crystal shot skyward from mountain ranges. Energy domes materialized over cities. The oceans heaved, forming towering barriers of water that blocked orbital bombardments. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography, as if the planet had been waiting for them to pull the trigger. Their weapons fell like hail, only to be absorbed, redirected, or simply undone. We watched one antimatter torpedo freeze in midair, surrounded by golden light, and then dissolve into a flock of butterflies. The message was clear: you fired your deadliest weapon, and in doing so, you made gods of your prey. The Varkari fleet tried to flee. That's when Commander Lucien Voss reappeared. He'd vanished months before, during the initial conflict, presumed dead after piloting a crippled warship into a neutron collapse zone to save a colony. Moon. But now he wasn't just alive. He glowed. He descended from the upper atmosphere like a comet, wrapped in armor that looked forged from stardust and magnetars. Energy arced around him as he stood in the vacuum of space without a suit, eyes blazing with the same power humming beneath Earth's crust. One man, against their entire fleet. He didn't fire a shot. He just looked at them. Ships deactivated, engines froze, weapons melted, and then the Varkari screamed, every transmission, every frequency. A single, terrified phrase in their native tongue. The Corburn walks. The weapon walks. They fled. Those who didn't, dissolved into light. Back on Earth, the skies returned to peace. The forests whispered again. The oceans calmed. People stepped from bunkers into sunlight cleaner than any in recorded history. Children played with tamed lightning. Elders wept as diseases vanished from their blood. Humanity stood at the edge of something massive, terrifying, glorious, unknown. We weren't the same species anymore. The weapon meant to destroy us had elevated us, and the galaxy. It had just learned that the most dangerous creature, is one that doesn't die when you kill it. When we emerged from the crater of the old world, something had changed. The skies above weren't just clearer, they sang. Not in the musical sense, no. It was subtler than that. A resonance, a pressure, a frequency that made birds soar higher, and grass grow faster. The deadliest weapon they'd fired hadn't just failed to kill us, it had ignited something primal, something ancient. And now, we were becoming something else entirely. They called it the Veil Bloom. That's what the aliens named it in their intercepted transmissions. Not because it was beautiful, though it was, in a haunting, surreal way, but because they believed something had bloomed across the boundary between life and death. They thought it was a mistake. They thought the weapon had misfired, rebounded, destabilized due to Earth's atmospheric anomalies. A fluke. They were wrong. We were changing because Earth had accepted the attack, absorbed it, metabolized it, and now we had begun to return the favor. It started in the ruins of London. What had once been ash and broken concrete was now swarming with bioluminescent plant life. No one had planted anything, and yet the gardens grew, twisting. Ancient vines surged from sidewalks, pulsing with light like veins under skin. In the city center, a tree had grown. No one knew how fast, but it towered over the shattered skyline like a beacon. Locals said if you stood under it at night, you could hear your ancestors whisper. Even the blind could see. Even the dying felt life surge in their blood again. Doctors in underground hospitals reported the impossible. Tumors reversed. Infections vanished. Children born in fallout zones emerged healthy, with no trace of radiation. Even their chromosomes looked enhanced. At first, we believed we were being gifted. Then we realized we were being prepared. When the second wave came, they didn't send weapons. They sent harvesters. Cold, chrome-fleshed things with eyes like prisms and fingers like surgical steel. They moved through our cities collecting data, samples, trying to understand the mutation they had, unintentionally triggered. One made the mistake of touching a child. It disintegrated in seconds, not from fire or impact, but from rejection, as if the child's presence unraveled its molecular structure. We didn't need to fight them anymore. Earth itself had begun rejecting their kind. The soil wouldn't accept their boots. The air corroded their armor. The oceans boiled around their ships, even without heat. One by one, their landing crafts failed, as if the very laws of nature bent to humanity's survival. What we'd once needed machines to do, kill, adapt, evolve, we now did by existing. It terrified them. In orbit, they screamed. Not in pain, but confusion. Their coms were laced with panic. Phase anomaly detected on planetary scale. Weapon Alpha 99 effect, inversion confirmed. Isolated pathogen spread is not viable. Host consciousness interference suspected. That last part, host consciousness, they were beginning to suspect that the changes weren't just biological, they were psychological. That somehow, humanity's will had inverted the weapon's function. That our pain, our rage, our refusal to die had rewritten the blast mid-flight. They believed in physics. We believed in defiance, and defiance had warped reality. Meanwhile, we changed faster. Some began to hear the stars, not metaphorically lit. Astronomers reported strange dreams of orbital harmonics. Engineers began designing machines that interfaced directly with Earth's magnetic fields without ever learning the schematics. They just knew. It was as if every survivor had become a node in a vast neural web, not hive-minded, something deeper, connected, amplified. Alive, in ways that bent the very meaning of life. A soldier named Marek led a patrol through the old war zone in Belarus. His bones had been shattered a dozen times. Nerve damage left him paralyzed years ago. Now he walked without aid. He didn't remember learning how to walk again. He just got up, back in orbit. The alien fleet deployed their final measure, the core. A weapon designed not to destroy matter, but meaning. It erased causality. Where it struck, nothing made sense. Fire froze. Time ran backward. Gravity became erratic. It was meant to destabilize human thought, to break the mind. They targeted the ruins of Rio. 100,000 survivors. A population rising fast with newborns, showing strange neural signatures, higher memory capacity, ambient bioelectric fields, unexplainable sensory awareness. They wanted to break the heart of this new humanity. They launched it directly at the city. And it vanished. Not in a fireball, not in a defensive interception. It simply never arrived. Later, surveillance drones picked up footage, grainy, shaky, incomplete, of a woman standing alone in the sky. Just standing, her arms out, her eyes burning with a spectrum no camera could record. Around her, the air shimmered, thick as glass. She hadn't blocked the weapon, she had unwritten it. The aliens didn't send another attack after that. They fled. We had no flags to raise, no celebrations, no declaration of victory, only silence, and the question, what had we become? The changes continued. Skin hardened in some, bones lightened and strengthened in others. Language evolved. Children began to speak in tones and pitches adults couldn't replicate, communicating meanings we barely grasped. We called it ascension, but it wasn't rising. It was anchoring a fusion with something ancient and vast. Earth had always been alive. It had simply waited for us to bleed enough to hear it, and now we weren't just surviving the war. We were the response in deep space. The Alien Council gathered. They had seen many wars, conquered hundreds of species, broken stars, rewritten planets, enslaved gods, but they had never seen anything like us. A species that took death and turned it into evolution, that turned weapons into wombs, that didn't fight harder, just became something unfightable. In their final analysis, one phrase echoed in their xenological logs: do not engage Earth, do not return. They are not what we made them. They are what they made of us. The first thing we noticed wasn't the light, it was the silence. A kind of stillness that didn't belong on a battlefield. The kind that pressed against your chest, made your breathing louder, your heartbeat thunder. It was the kind of silence that preceded something holy or catastrophic. High above Earth, in the shattered ring of orbital wreckage and fire, the Cathal dreadnought Voronthal ceased its assault. Its weapons dimmed, its shields dropped, and its tentacled command protrusions slumped like dying vines. Even from the ground, telescopes captured the image of the once majestic flagship shuddering, as if gasping for breath. Then came the light. It wasn't like the weapon they had fired at us weeks ago. An energy so dense, it collapsed the shields of continents and threatened to melt the mantle beneath. That weapon had been their declaration of finality, the universal punctuation mark of extinction. But what followed now was different. A slow, aura-like ripple that cascaded across the sky, painted in hues of gold, violet, and deep ember red. Where it touched debris, wreckage mended. Where it touched our soldiers, wounds closed. Where it touched the dead, they stirred. Private Layla Marks had been struck down by falling debris in the second orbital strike. Her unit had buried her under the scorched earth beside base Ares. Yet now, the ground cracked. Not violently, but softly. The soil parted like water. Fingers rose, trembling, coated in red clay. She came back gasping, her lungs filling as if awakening from deep underwater. The other soldiers, now kneeling beside graves and mass craters, watched in awe and horror as the fallen rose. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. It wasn't resurrection as we understood it. It was something else. Something older than death, in orbit. The Cathal broadcast nothing. No signal, no transmission. Nothing but a single, system-wide alert from their own emergency channels. Do not touch the humans again. We beg you. For your own salvation. Admiral Crane stood on the bridge of the last surviving Earth ship, the Unity's Edge, a vessel cobbled together from fusion drives, shattered colonial wings, and a reactor that had only 8 hours of life left. Behind him stood the Joint Command Council American, Chinese, Nigerian, Brazilian, Martian colony envoys all, staring at the image. On screen the Voronthal was no longer Weaponized. It was blossoming. Its entire hull had become crystalline, refracting the very light it had once tried to extinguish. It looked alive, not in the sense of a ship gaining sentience. No, the ship was becoming something new, something organic, something human, almost. "What the hell did we do?" whispered Crane. Dr. Seong, head of Terran xenobiology, held a trembling datapad. "We didn't. They did." "Who's they?" "The Cathal didn't fire a weapon to kill us. Not just that. They fired their entire essence. A biosynthetic plague, designed to erase us, to rewrite our biology so no more human could ever exist. But something happened." She tapped the pad. "The virus adapted, mutated, or rather, it was rejected." Crane narrowed his eyes. "Rejected. It bonded with us, not like a parasite, like a symbiote. Our immune systems didn't just fight it, they absorbed it, and in doing so, we reprogrammed it. Our biology turned their death code into something else entirely." "Into what?" Siang's voice was barely above a whisper. "Into life." Reports flooded in from all across the globe. Cancer wards emptied. Paraplegics stood. Memories long buried returned with crystal clarity. Soldiers who had been born deaf could now hear the whispers of the wind. It was no longer just healing, it was elevation. Humanity wasn't simply surviving, it was evolving hour by hour. Some began to perceive radio signals with no hardware. Others could translate alien glyphs instinctively. Children born in the aftermath carried iridescent eyes and could see spectrums. Previously unknown, we hadn't just won a war, we had transcended it. Of course, not all were ready. Entire governments collapsed in fear. Religious factions declared the event heresy, divine judgment, or both. The UN disbanded. A new body emerged, the Accord of Dawn, composed, not of nations, but of minds. Scientists, leaders, civilians, thinkers, warriors, those whose souls had been touched by the change and chose to protect it. The Cathal tried to apologize. Their emissaries, if you could call, the fragments of light that emerged from their dying ships. Emissaries descended upon Earth like mourners at a funeral. They didn't beg for peace, they offered. Themselves, the Cathal uploaded their entire civilization into our servers. Art, language, history, weapon, blueprints, defensive code, even their soul maps, the closest thing they had to consciousness. All of it given freely, not as spoils of war, but as penance. "We did not know what you were," their final message said. "Now we do. You are not prey. You are not prey. You are not gods. You are not even enemies. You are mirrors. We attacked to extinguish the fire, and instead, you made us burn brighter." The new human emerged, not with fanfare, not with crowns or fire or conquest, but with open hands, luminous veins, and hearts that no longer feared the stars. We did not take revenge. We offered forgiveness, and when the next species came curious, cautious, eager, we welcomed them, not with shields, but with the story of the weapon that healed, the war that elevated, and the moment humanity stopped being the underdog, and became the spark that relit the galaxy, in the vastness of space. Long after Earth had rebuilt its cities into floating towers and memory-sealed domes, a child asked his mother, "Why doesn't anyone attack us anymore?" She smiled, "Because once, someone did. They used everything they had, and we turned it into light. That light still burned, far beyond the stars, in every fleet bearing Earth's symbol. In every world where our people walked, not conquerors, not victims, but the impossible survivors of a war meant to erase them, who instead rewrote the rules of life itself. And the oldest warning in the cosmos was now changed. It no longer read, "Do not mess with humans." It now said, "Touch them if you seek rebirth. Strike them if you want to see the divine. And if you wish to end them, prepare to become more than you ever dreamed."